Okay, this measurement here would be what you want to be your hem allowance. Super minor. I actually only just serged this, so I give myself 1/8 of an inch here on a full scale sloper. And I know that's a lot to draft out on this little mini, so I'm giving myself 1/16 of an inch. But then, like I said, you want to look at this as if you're going to sew it, so it is a complete turn up at this actual hem that you want. And then turn it back down. And then from here, use your little rotary wheel. Oops. And think of this as an extension from your inseam and outseam. And there's your new shape. So it'll kind of dip in to then dip back out. So it's got a like kind of a fanned appearance. Pleats are very specific like that, and that's really what this cuff is you're creating a pleat to turn back on itself on this pattern piece at the hem. So this is for the most part done. We haven't talked about pockets yet, so I do want to talk about pockets. You can always choose a slash pocket, which is something as simple as drawing a line like this that will then piece back in with a pocket bag and a facing here. But I want to talk about a side seam pocket. Super simple to sew, but you've got to think about shifting your side seam forward a bit just in order to like make that pocket for the wearer a little bit easier to get in and out of. So on a full scale sloper, I would do probably 3/4 of an inch. And again, I just do that from the waist down to the hip line. I don't have my French curves out, but great place for that. But remember, what you take from here, you've got to give to the back. So that just needs to be an extension. Again, full scale sloper, about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to extend this out. Again, I'm only going to draft this down to the hip line. And just remember, we did get rid of the side seam at our waistband, so we're already prepped there and everything will match up nicely. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give this a little cut. And I'm only going to demo this cuff down here once, but know that what you do on one piece needs to be transferred again to the second. So same method, use it front to back, back to front. But I really want to spend some time talking about pockets. So before I go drafting separate pieces, I like to look at it on my piece here. So back body, you are now officially done with this once you've added your cuff at the hem. Front body, I like to close up my pleats, and know your pleats can close in either direction. This is like preference, European versus American. So it doesn't really matter. These are going to be a knife pleat, but again, whatever direction you choose is up to you. There is no right, there is no wrong. I'm just going to tape these shut for the time being. And that's just at the top. So I want to form my pocket bag. Pocket bags have a lot of preference too. You'll see them drafted several different ways. Some people will just draft them, you know, straight down from maybe the middle point of the waist down. I actually like mine when I'm creating trousers to finish into the center front. And you can later stitch that closed, but this allows the pocket bag not to pull out, anything awkward like that that could happen when you're wearing it. It's just a more formal approach to your finishing step. And then for as far down as you come, I like to come maybe like, I'm going to say 4 inches down. You do not want to come past your crotch line. Scoop this up and then over at the center front. So that gives us our pocket bag shaping. Super easy when you're working with a side seam pocket. You're just going to cut this 4 times. So you've got a left side, a right side, a knuckle, and a palm side. So cut that 4 times to this shape here. Now just so we can peek at our pleats again. I'm going to move this back out, and okay, I'm just going to do a real super quick trace. It's not going to be the perfect pocket bag, but just to get my point across for facings, because you will absolutely still need a facing. Every single pocket bag you want a facing. You never want to have to see your lining. There's a reason it's called a lining. So there's our pocket bag. So again, like I said, cut 4. And we extended down from the hip line. So you want your opening to maybe be from here to the top, and just exclude that seam allowance. I usually don't bar tack at the top, but I will bar tack at the bottom. Understitch or top stitch, but we'll talk about that a little later. But we know that we want to have a true pocket facing. So again, I'm just going to show you on here, and you want a pocket facing palm side and knuckle side, just because you don't want anything to show should it come out. So let's say knuckle side can be a little more slim, and you want this to run parallel to your side seam. So it may have a bit of a curved shape to it, and that's absolutely perfect. So here's knuckle side. Palm side, I like to extend it just a little bit further. And to be honest, to cut down on the bulk that ends up here, I like to bring it down just even further into my side seam. And then push it out just a bit. But again, keeping the primary line parallel with this side seam here. So then you'll want to trace these pattern pieces off, and again label, this is hand pocket facing, knuckle side versus palm side, but you are not going to manipulate your pocket bag in any way. This is just an addition to the pocket bag as it stands right now. So like I said, every pocket needs a facing. So now that's complete. We do have a fly extension, but we also want to have a fly guard. So for the fly guard, I like to cut it twice the width that I have here. Like I said earlier, full scale sloper, this would be maybe 1.5 inches wide. So we're just gonna draw, let's just play with a 1/2 inch for our little mini. Overall length can be the same, so let's say this is a 7.5 inch fly. You can keep your guard the same. It'll have a fold line down the center. So this gets folded and then closed in on itself. I serge a lot of these pieces because it's quick and it keeps any additive of bulk down, just keeps it to a minimum. So here's your little fly guard. Eyeballing everything, so I went a little too long. Let's just, you guys are gonna measure. So there's our guard, and the front is done. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to talk about the back. So while this piece is done, we do want to add a pocket. So let's add a welt to one side. So we can just do a single welt. You don't have to have a pocket on both sides, but you're going to draft it the same. So each welt you want to be about 6.5 inches based on whatever the width of your hand is. You want to be able to get it in and out. Female hands are a little smaller, so you have a little more leniency there for this size. With a man's pocket, I never go under 6.5 inches. So draft that out. You want this to be parallel to the hip line when your dart is closed. So you can fold this and take a peek at that. Some patterns will place the pocket right over the dart. That is up to you. I'm going to keep mine right at the tip. Again, this is just to cut down on some of that excess bulk, and I've got a pretty high rise, so I can do that. But just things to put into thought. And if it helps you, you can even decide pocket placement upon first fitting, and you don't even have to decide that at a pattern level if you're not ready. So here's where my welt will stand. On my actual pattern piece, I'm just going to note where my stitch lines will be. So a welt, single welt, on a typical pattern, standard size would be about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch in depth. So let's just mark this at 1/2 inch. Total width by 6.5 inches length. And you're just gonna mark placement. But for that, you actually want the welt. So I actually give myself a really hefty seam allowance on my welts, even though I'm going to be cutting it down. So we know we have 1/2 inch. You want to multiply that by 2 because you're going to use a fold line to finish the top edge. And then we want to add seam allowance on top of that. So let's say we're going to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance to each side. So we're going to have full scale sloper, 2.5 inches in width. And then same thing for the sides. I'm pretty hefty here, so I like to just start with a lot of seam allowance and clip down. So you'll want to do 7.5 inches in length. So again, 2 inches by 7.5 inches. And then down the center, mark your fold line. And again, this becomes your welt. Okay, and I know I'm extreme, so I'm just gonna clip that down for a good visual here. Okay, but for every welt, you gotta have a pocket bag. So same thing that I did over here, I like to visualize it, draft it out before I actually go applying it to its own separate piece. And these pocket bags are, again, I'm just gonna put thoughts out there that are up for grabs. It is nice to finish a pocket bag into the waistband. It just keeps your welt from gaping open, but absolutely not necessary because again, none of this is going to be a functional pocket bag in terms of like where you can reach a hand. But then from the actual welt itself, I like to square down and then just create a rounded bottom here. So I know we've got 6.5 inches across for the actual welt length. I like my pocket bags to be deep, and so to be honest, most of the time I end up like squaring this measurement here. So let's say that I've got 6.5 inches in total depth coming down to this bottom point here. Another thing that you can do is you can just leave these straight and create a fold line here. So when you see this, it's gonna look, I'll do it this way. I'm gonna just try to give you guys a super quick visual. I never trust a pocket bag, so I like to just do a fold line. I will trust the weave in the fabric before I will trust stitching. So your back pocket bag would look like this when extended. And then you would just mark your welt on one side. So there's your welt placement. When this gets sewn into the body, it'll fit back here like this and hang freely. So there you've got your true welt, your pocket bag. But like I said, with the front, you always want a facing, even with this welt here. So now I want you to imagine a facing. You want it to be above the top lip of the welt and below, just so that should anything gape open, all you see is self material rather than lining. And so that back pocket bag facing shape. Would just be like this. So let me just, I'm going to color this in so you can see it clearly. So this is where we would attach it to the pant here. That would flip in to finish like this. And then this facing would get sewn here so that when this folds up, that's what'll show on the front side of the pant. Whereas this little guy would be right here hanging out. So again, the facing gets sewn on the opposite side of the pocket bag as where you attach it to the opening. So that gives us front, back, hand pocket bag, back pocket bag, your two facings for the front pocket bag, and fly extension, let's not forget that, your actual welt, and your back pocket facing. And the very last thing I want to talk about again is this waistband. So you're going to want a left side of the waistband and a right side of the waistband to save on pattern paper. It's probably going to go against the grain of what most other teachers are going to tell you, but I'm just going to give this to you as an option because you will see this a lot of the time with commercial patterns. So you can keep the same waistband for left and right for most of it, and then just offer an extension on one side or the other. So I want to say, I think men's trousers, the extension is on the left and women's is on the right. And all this extension needs to hold is simply a hook and bar. You can do a button, and it could be a drastic extension if you wanted it. But to be honest, even like 5/8, 3/4 inch extension is well enough to get a hook and a bar on there. And then you would just have written out cut for left waistband here, and then cut for right waistband here. So the only difference is just going to be the extension from right to left. Okay, I'm not going to demo this because I don't need to, but make sure you add all of your seam allowances. Hem allowance, it doesn't need to be called out so much so because we've added a cuff here, but you definitely want to call out your cuff depth and create little notches where you want the folds to be. And yeah, add seam allowance to everything. So the pocket bag in full, even your facings will all have to have a seam allowance because you'll want to, it'll be designer's choice to either serge or turn under. Again, I always serge these pieces. And waistband, same thing, half inch to everything. And yeah, that does it for the pants. So overall, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 10 pieces, maybe 11. But there is your trouser.